So I had a lot of you recommend me this story, which was rather surprising considering how old it is in comparison to the other stuff that was recommended, as well as how short overall it is. It's only 16 odd chapters, very simple, one that you can smash out within an hour or so, but nonetheless beautiful, very fulfilling, very enjoyable, very sad and emotional, but enjoyable. I do think a lot of you will probably like it. The series is called 3 Days of Happiness. Its alternative name is I Sold My Life for 10,000 yen per year. From my knowledge, this was originally a novel back in 2013, and sometime around 2017, 2018, it got turned into a manga, and then it recently got an English licensing for its novel within 2020. So over the years, it's definitely grown in popularity and reception enough for it to be translated in multiple different ways, and I can see why. It's a very introspective work. It's something that's very personal. It's finding out your value, your worth, the true meaning of life and happiness, and how much that equates to living it. How much would you sell it for? Could you even put a price on it? In such a short amount of time, it manages to capture a lot of these things, and does so in a way that's very not only enjoyable but intuitive. It's not overbearing, it's not overwhelming, but it's a very nice experience to kind of go through and learn bit by bit. Obviously, it has this sprinkle of fantasy to make it possible, but that in itself is not overwhelming. It's more so just a tool that's added to allow the story to rotate the way it wants to. And because it's so natural, you don't second guess it. You don't think there's any ulterior things or motives at play, and it's just something that exists within this world, within this story. How this works is that the main character is known as Kusunoki. He's someone that's definitely had it rough. He currently has no money, he's struggling to find work, he doesn't have any food to eat, and ultimately it's looking rather grim for him, and it's boiled over into this depressive state that continues to exist because of the hardships that follow him, and that he can't seemingly pull himself out of. It gets to a point where he's selling everything within his house, and as he's doing so, the person that's buying some of this stuff mentions that he can sell his life, or more specifically what remains of it. Of course, our main character is confused and doesn't believe it, but being at the end of his limits and not really having anywhere else to go or anything else to do, he decides to take up this opportunity just to check it out, just to see what is going on. This turns out to be a legitimate thing. He goes to get his life evaluated, and he comes back a couple of hours later and they offer him money for the remainder of his life. Obviously, this is a choice. He can choose how many years that he wants to sell, and after finding out about how much money his life is truly worth, the remaining of it, all the way up to his death, he realizes that it's not that much. It's not the hypothetical 1 billion yen that he had scurrying between his mind. It's only 300,000, which roughly equates to $3,000. Obviously, he's still kind of confused about the whole situation. The biggest one being that a massive remaining portion of his life is only worth that little. But he decides to take it and gives himself 3 months to live with that remaining $3,000. Now, the person behind the desk that served him would be a woman named Miyagi, and she would become his observer, someone that watches over a person when they sell off the remaining portion of their life and only have a handful of days, weeks, or months remaining. This is to stop the person from doing anything wild or out of character or unprofessional, so to speak. She affirms that a lot of people do tend to get desperate in their remaining days and tend to do some pretty wild things. So for the final 3 months of Kusunoki's life, he would do things that he would never thought he would ever do. He would experience feelings and life and bits and pieces of happiness alongside Miyagi, witnessing it all. And the story rotates and changes into something that's rather memorable, something that he will always remember. As I said at the beginning, this is a very short story. It's only 16 chapters. It's something that you could literally read after watching this video within the next 30 minutes to an hour. I will warn you, however, it is rather emotional. It's one of those ones that kind of bring a bit of existential dread. It's meant to play or tug on your heartstrings, and it does a good job in doing so. One of the best ways that it does all of this is how hard-hitting the reality of the situation is. This isn't a perfect world with perfect measures, with perfect things that happen in response, and this comes in the form of a childhood sweetheart. One of the biggest crux or points of this story is the main character meeting a childhood friend that he hasn't seen for many years, one that he made a promise with, that if by the time at this certain age that they didn't meet anyone, that they would marry each other. They got separated, so to speak, through the schooling system, through college, etc., and life has happened. One of Kusunoki's kind of final things that he wants to do before he dies, ultimately in 3 months' time, is to meet this childhood sweetheart known as Himeno. The journey that takes place to go and see her, it's not the whole story, but it's a small fraction of it, is very valuable to himself. It's something that he felt like he had to do, but he found out things that ultimately he should not have known, and that he would have never known. Stuff about Himeno, her life, what happened to her after they drifted apart, and what she would do after they meet again. The story plays it off in a way that is so normal, which is kind of the scariest thing about it, because it feels inherently authentic in a way, and it's something that you don't pay attention to after. Once it happens, and then you just move forward with it, and it's scary to an extent. I appreciate how it's done like that, and how it's just somewhat beamed through it, but also on the other hand, I would have loved to see more of a response to this action, to this thing that happens to Himeno. It's finding the value between both of those points of should you show it, shouldn't you show it, and what the true value of the story actually is. So it's this very interesting balancing act that you wish there was more here for it, but maybe it's extrapolated further within the novel. But it still handles itself respectfully, it's still well thought out, it still can be appreciated. What joins a lot of these actions and things together, right, is Miyagi, who is this observer to the main character over his final days, but Miyagi can't be seen by anyone. This is where the very partial fantasy mystical elements come into play. Miyagi is kind of considered a ghost. She doesn't exist within the minds of people, and when you find out about her backstory, her past, and why she is in the position that she is in, it starts to make a lot more sense. You start to feel a lot more to her, that she isn't just some robot, that she isn't just some random employee, but she's very similar to Kusunoki in a lot of different ways, and has a different avenue for life and a different value for it. But they come to understand each other quite a bit. They come to unravel each other bit by bit, and during these final months you watch Kusunoki change in his entirety, from someone that was so self-enclosed, was so upset with the world and with himself and just all over the place mentally and emotionally, to being someone that felt free and liberated and finding his own true worth, finding his own value and what it means to be happy, even though finding all of this worth and grabbing onto it came at the cost of selling the remaining portions of his life. This is not something that he would have ever envisioned. This is not something that was planned. This is through trial and error. This is through the desperations of trying to complete some sort of bucket list. At any point, he would most likely retract his statement, retract his purchase of selling off his own life. But that's not a possibility. Instead, his true value, worth, or happiness comes from helping other people at the end of it all. And the one that it bleeds into, obviously, is Miyagi. He helps her. He spends more time with her, even though she is an observer that's watching him constantly. He spends time with her in a way that is human, in a way that acknowledges her existence, in a way that makes her feel something. She has been ignored her entire life. She literally cannot be seen, and he does not care about the reception of public. It just seems like he's talking to himself, and then he starts to become a bit of a myth, a bit of a legend because of this. And then other people start to believe that Miyagi exists, even though they can't see her, that they don't know that she's real. Because Kusunoki has so much attention towards her, that believes in her, that starts to eventually fall in love with her, and vice versa, it becomes somewhat of a reality for other people. They see it. They see that value shining. And this is something that ultimately helps Miyagi quite a lot. By the end of it, they grow very close to one another. And the conclusion of this story is bittersweet. It's beautiful. It's fitting to the situation. It's fitting to Kusunoki as a main character, and his journey over only 69 chapters being so tremendously filled with this introspective understanding of himself, finding that value and the happiness that he wants in the very small remaining days, and how his happiness is constructed or built by trying to make other people happy as well. And Miyagi is the first person that he feels so inherently connected to, as they are in opposite but very similar positions. In conclusion, I think 3 Days of Happiness, or I Sold My Life for 10,000 yen per year, is a nice little read. It's very simple, it's very sweet, it's very beautiful, probably very emotional for a lot of people, and something that you can complete in probably about an hour. If you're looking for a story that is a nice bite-sized snack, that isn't overwhelming, and very beautifully envisioned, defining oneself, I think you would definitely like 3 Days of Happiness. Maybe give it a chance. You might actually enjoy it. Endtime. So with that, welcome to the end of the video. If you have made it this far, thank you. I appreciate you. If you have read 3 Days of Happiness, let me know how you feel about it. It's a very short story. It's very simple, but a lot of you recommended it, and it was well worth it. That's for sure. Very emotional, very beautiful, and the ending hurt quite a bit, but definitely well thought out. Let me know in the comment section below. But with that, I want to thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Leave a like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Drink plenty of water, and I will see you within the next one. Goodbye.